So Donald Trump made 7 specific claims about Canada to justify his tariff policy. Mark Carney just went through them one by one with the actual data, and every single one of them is false. Not exaggerated, not misleading, not a matter of interpretation. False. Demonstrably, provably, verifiably false. Carney played clips of Trump saying each one, then put the actual numbers on screen beside them. And the gap between what the President of the United States told the American public and what is actually true is so large that there are only 2 explanations. Either the President doesn't understand his own country's most important trade relationship, in which case he has no business making policy about it, or he knows the truth and is deliberately telling the American public something different, in which case the word for that is not exaggeration. It's something else entirely. Warren Buffett said he's never seen a major economic policy built on this many false premises, and then explained why a leader who lies about data makes catastrophic decisions every time without exception. But here's what happened when Carney presented the corrections. Trump didn't correct the record, he didn't present counter data, he didn't cite alternative sources. He called Carney the biggest liar in the world, which, when your response to being fact-checked with your own government's data is to accuse the fact-checker of lying, tells you everything about which side has the numbers and which side has the volume. When you see what Trump actually said, what the actual numbers are, and how wide the gap is between the two, you'll understand why this isn't a policy disagreement. It's a president lying to his own country about its own economy. So, let me play you what Trump said first, because the claims need to be heard in full before you can appreciate how thoroughly Carney demolished them. Trump was at an extended press conference building the public case for his tariff policy against Canada. He wasn't ranting. He wasn't going off script in the way he sometimes does at rallies. This was structured, deliberate. He had notes in front of him. He was reading from talking points, 7 specific claims presented as established facts, delivered with the confidence of someone who expects to be believed, and who has no doubt that the numbers he's citing are accurate. And millions of Americans did believe him, because when the President of the United States states something as fact in a formal setting, with cameras rolling and reporters writing it down, people trust that someone somewhere checked the numbers before he said them. They trust that the most powerful person in the world has access to the best data in the world and is presenting it honestly. That trust is the foundation of democratic governance. And that trust is what makes the lies so damaging, because the lies were received as facts by people who had every reason to believe them. Here's what he said. I'm going to give you all 7 claims exactly as he stated them, because the specificity matters. These aren't vague impressions or casual opinions. These are specific, quantifiable, verifiable claims about measurable economic realities. And every one of them can be checked. Carney checked them. Claim 1. We have a massive trade deficit with Canada. They're taking us for hundreds of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions. It's the worst deal in the history of trade. Maybe the worst deal ever. Claim 2. Canada doesn't pay for defense. They hide behind the American military. They rely on our protection and they contribute almost nothing. We're defending them and they don't even have the decency to pay their share. Claim 3. Without us, Canada is finished. Their economy would collapse overnight. They need us way more than we need them. Everybody knows that. They know it. And instead of being grateful, they complain about tariffs. Claim 4. Canada has been charging us massive tariffs for years. Massive. They hit our farmers. They hit our manufacturers. And we've just been sitting there taking it. All we're doing is evening the score. Claim 5. Their dairy tariffs are almost 300%. They're robbing our dairy farmers blind while we let their products in practically for free. Claim 6. Canada is stealing millions of American jobs. Our factories are closing. They're moving north because of unfair trade. and our workers are suffering while Canada gets rich off our backs. Claim 7. We don't need their energy. People keep saying we need Canadian oil. We don't. America is energy independent. We produce more than we use. Canadian energy is a luxury, not a necessity. 7 claims, each one presented as fact, each one absorbed by millions of Americans who trust the president to tell them the truth about their own economy. Each one now serves as the stated justification for the most aggressive tariff policy against an allied nation in modern American history, and every single one of them is wrong. Mark Carney decided it was time to correct the record. Not with rhetoric, not with retaliation, not with threats, with facts. He held a press conference not framed as a diplomatic response, but as what he called a correction of the public record. Behind him, a split screen. On the left, Trump's quote. On the right, the actual data. His tone was measured, almost professorial. No anger, no theatrics, just a man with numbers walking through claims that don't survive contact with reality. The President of the United States made 7 specific claims about Canada yesterday, Carney began. Every one of them is false. Not exaggerated, not misleading, false. And because these false claims are being used to justify tariffs that affect millions of people on both sides of the border, the public record requires correction. So let's go through them. Correction 1, the trade deficit. Trump said hundreds of billions. The actual goods trade deficit between the U.S. and Canada is approximately 60 to 80 billion depending on the year and the accounting method. Significant, but nowhere near hundreds of billions. And that's only goods. When you include services, which is how economists actually measure trade relationships, the United States runs a trade surplus with Canada of approximately 25 to 30 billion. The total bilateral trade picture, measured correctly, is roughly balanced. And the goods deficit that does exist is overwhelmingly driven by one thing: energy imports. Oil, natural gas, electricity, products that America imports from Canada not as a luxury or a favor, but because American refineries, American power grids, and American heating systems physically require them to function. Calling energy imports a trade deficit, Carney said, is like saying you have a deficit with your electric company. You're not being exploited, you're buying something you need. And the president either knows this or should. Correction 2, military freeloading. Trump said Canada contributes almost nothing. Carney didn't raise his voice for this one. He lowered it. Canada has been America's NORAD partner since 1958. For 67 years, Canada and the United States have shared the cost and the responsibility of defending North American airspace. Canadian radar installations across the Arctic are essential to America's missile early warning system. Canada is a founding member of the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, the most sensitive intelligence sharing arrangement in the world. Canadian forces fought in Korea. Canadian forces stormed Juno Beach on D-Day. Canadian forces served in every major NATO operation of the past 70 years. Then he paused. 158 Canadian soldiers died in Afghanistan. They fought alongside American soldiers. They bled alongside American soldiers. They died alongside American soldiers. Not because America told them to, because they chose to. Another pause, longer this time. The president said Canada contributes nothing. I invite him to say that to the families of the 158. The room was silent. Correction 3. Economic dependency. Trump said Canada's economy would collapse overnight without the United States. Carney presented Canada's economic profile. The 10th largest economy in the world, a G7 member, the most resource-rich nation per capita on Earth, a country trading with over 200 nations, a country actively building new trade partnerships with India, the European Union, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the broader Commonwealth. Then he flipped the dependency data, the same data from the previous economic reality briefing that had already gone viral. The United States imports 60% of its crude oil from Canada, 98% of its pipeline natural gas, over 80% of its potash, electricity for 6 states, and drinking water for 40 million Americans. Canada's economy would not collapse without the United States, Carney said, but 6 American states might go dark without Canadian electricity, and American refineries would shut down within weeks without Canadian crude. So when the president says Canada would collapse without America, I'd respectfully suggest he check which direction the pipelines flow. Correction 4. Canadian tariffs. Trump said Canada charges massive tariffs on American goods. Carney held up a document. This is the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, signed by President Trump on January 29, 2020. He called it, and I'm quoting, "the most important trade deal in the history of our country." This agreement eliminated the vast majority of tariffs between the United States and Canada. Canada's average applied tariff on American goods under USMCA is among the lowest of any American trading partner. He set the document down. The president is describing a trade problem that his own agreement was designed to solve and then claiming the problem still exists. He is contradicting the deal he signed with his own hand. Either the deal he celebrated as his greatest achievement didn't work, or the trade problem he's describing doesn't exist. He can't have it both ways. Correction 5. Dairy. Trump said Canada's 300% dairy tariffs represent the trade relationship. Carney acknowledged the number. Canada does maintain high tariffs on certain dairy products, up to 270% on some categories. This is part of Canada's supply management system, and it is a legitimate subject of trade negotiation. We've never denied that. Then the context. Dairy represents less than half of 1% of total bilateral trade between the two countries, less than half of 1%. The president is using a tariff on 1/2 of 1% of trade to justify 100% tariffs on the other 99.5%. He paused, letting the math work. That's like complaining about a squeaky floorboard and using it as justification to burn down the entire house. The floorboard is real. The response is insane. Correction 6. Jobs. Trump said millions of jobs have been stolen by Canada. Carney presented Department of Commerce data, American data from an American agency. Over 8 million American jobs depend directly on trade with Canada. 8 million. The integrated U.S.-Canada supply chain doesn't steal American jobs. It creates them. The auto sector alone employs hundreds of thousands of Americans in positions that exist specifically because parts, components, and finished vehicles move back and forth across the border as part of a single manufacturing process. He shook his head slightly. Canada hasn't stolen American jobs. Canada is the reason 8 million Americans have jobs. The supply chain doesn't take employment from one country and hand it to another. It creates employment in both. Tariffing that supply chain doesn't bring jobs back. It destroys them on both sides of the border. Correction 7. Energy independence. Trump said America doesn't need Canadian energy because America is energy independent. This was the correction where Carney's tone became most precise, most technical, most careful, because the misconception is so widely held and so fundamentally misunderstood. Energy independence, he explained, is a net calculation. It means the United States in aggregate produces approximately as much energy as it consumes in total. That is true, but it does not mean every specific import is unnecessary. It does not mean American refineries can run on American crude alone, because they can't. He pulled up a chart showing crude oil grades. American shale oil is light sweet crude. American Gulf Coast refineries are configured to process heavy sour crude, the kind that comes from Canada's oil sands. These are different products with different chemical properties. You cannot simply substitute one for the other any more than you can put diesel in a gasoline engine and expect it to run. He let the technical point settle. Energy independence is an accounting identity. It is not a physical reality at the refinery level. American refineries need Canadian heavy crude not as a preference, not as a convenience, as a chemical requirement of the refining process. The president said America doesn't need Canadian energy. The chemistry says otherwise. Carney stepped back from the podium. The 7 corrections were done. The split screen behind him showed the full list. Trump's claim on the left, the actual number on the right, 7 times, each pair more damning than the last. 7 claims, 7 corrections. I want to be very clear about something. Every number I have cited today comes from American sources, Carney said. The U.S. Energy Information Administration, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Defense, the Census Bureau, the International Trade Commission. These are not Canadian talking points. They are not my opinions. They are American data published by American agencies measuring American economic reality. The numbers exist. They are public. Anyone can verify them. The question is why the President of the United States chose to say something different. He paused. And when he continued, his voice carried a weight that went beyond policy analysis. The President either does not know these numbers, in which case he is making the most consequential trade policy of his presidency about a relationship he fundamentally does not understand, or he does know them and chose to say something different to the American public, in which case the American people deserve to know that the justification for the tariffs they are paying, the tariffs that are raising their grocery bills and their energy costs and their housing prices, is built on claims that their own government's data contradicts. Either explanation is deeply troubling, neither is acceptable. His closing line landed with the precision of everything that had come before. We are not asking the president to like us. We are not asking for gratitude or praise or special treatment. We are asking for something much simpler than any of that. We are asking for the truth because policy built on lies produces outcomes nobody wants. And the people who pay the price for those outcomes are not prime ministers or presidents, they're workers, they're farmers, their families trying to buy groceries, fill their gas tanks, heat their homes, and keep their small businesses alive. They deserve better than fiction dressed up as foreign policy. Warren Buffett was asked about Carney's fact check at a Berkshire Hathaway event that evening. In my business, Buffett said, there's a phrase we use constantly, garbage in, garbage out. It means if the data you feed into your decision-making process is wrong, the decision that comes out will be wrong every time without exception. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how experienced you are. If you start with bad data, you end with bad outcomes. He paused. What Carney just demonstrated is that the data feeding American trade policy with its most important partner is wrong. Not partially wrong, not a matter of interpretation, wrong. 7 for 7. Every premise, every justification, every number the president cited to explain why these tariffs are necessary, all of it contradicted by the president's own government's data. He went deeper on why this matters beyond the immediate policy debate. I've spent 60 years trying to see the world as it actually is, not as I want it to be, not as would be convenient, not as would justify a decision I've already made. That discipline, the willingness to face uncomfortable facts rather than comfortable lies, is the single most important quality in any decision maker, in investing, in business, and in governance. He shook his head. The moment you start lying about reality to justify your actions, you lose the ability to course correct because you can't fix a problem you refuse to see. If you believe Canada steals American jobs when in fact 8 million Americans are employed because of trade with Canada, you'll impose tariffs that destroy the very jobs you claim to be saving. If you believe you don't need Canadian energy when your refineries literally cannot function without it, you'll create an energy crisis and blame Canada for the consequences of your own policy. The lies don't just misinform, they guarantee the wrong outcome. He drew the business parallel with the kind of granular specificity that makes Berkshire shareholders lean forward. If a CEO came to me with an investment proposal built on 7 false premises, every market assumption wrong, every competitive analysis wrong, every revenue projection based on numbers that don't match reality, I wouldn't just reject the proposal. I'd question whether that person should be making decisions at all. Because someone who either can't tell the difference between true and false or doesn't care about the difference is someone who will make the wrong call on everything, not sometimes, on everything. Because if the easy, verifiable facts are wrong, the complex judgment calls, the ones that actually require wisdom and experience, will be catastrophically wrong. He paused, then drew the scale comparison. Policy is investment at a national scale. And this tariff policy is essentially a multi-trillion-dollar investment decision. That's the scale of the U.S.-Canada trade relationship over the next decade, built on 7 premises that are all demonstrably false. In my world, that would result in lawsuits, terminations, and regulatory investigation. In politics, apparently, it results in more tariffs. Then Buffett said something about the human cost that was, in its quiet way, the most devastating thing anyone said all day. The cruelest part is who gets hurt. The lies sound good at a rally. Canada's ripping us off gets a standing ovation. The crowd loves it. It feels powerful. It feels like someone is finally standing up for them. But the tariffs that follow the lies don't hit Canada. They hit Americans. The farmer in Iowa whose input costs just doubled, he doesn't know the trade deficit claim is wrong. He trusts the president. He voted for the president. So when the tariff raises his feed prices by 50%, he blames Canada because that's what he was told to blame. But Canada didn't raise his costs. The tariff did. And the tariff was justified by a claim that is factually, provably, verifiably wrong. He let that sit for a long moment. The lies create a scapegoat. That's their function. Canada becomes the villain in a story that isn't true. And while millions of Americans are angry at the wrong target, angry at the country that employs 8 million of them, that supplies their energy, that shares their water, that guards their northern airspace, the actual damage, the damage caused by policy built on fiction, goes unaddressed. Because you can't solve a problem you refuse to diagnose honestly. And a president who starts every diagnosis with a lie guarantees the treatment will make the patient worse. His final point, what Carney did today matters. Not because it will change the president's mind, it won't, but because the American public deserves to have the actual numbers. Democracy requires informed voters. And right now, millions of Americans believe things about their own trade relationship, about their own economy, that are factually wrong. And those false beliefs are being used to justify policies that hurt them. The truth is, the most valuable commodity in any market, in investing, in business, in governance. What Carney presented today was the truth. What America does with it is up to America. Trump's response came within the hour. He didn't address a single correction, not one. He didn't present counter data on the trade deficit. He didn't dispute the military contribution numbers. He didn't explain the refinery chemistry that makes Canadian crude essential. He didn't address the USMCA contradiction. Instead, he called Carney the biggest liar in the world and a desperate globalist spreading Canadian propaganda. He called the press conference a disgrace and threatened consequences for what he described as foreign interference in American economic policy. When someone presents you with data from your own government agencies, American data published by American institutions measuring American economic reality, and your response is to call them a liar without offering a single contrary number, you haven't rebutted the data. You've confirmed that you can't. White House staff were asked by reporters to provide counter data on each of Carney's 7 corrections. They couldn't, because every number Carney cited came from American sources. You can't argue with the Bureau of Economic Analysis using a social media post. You can't rebut the Energy Information Administration with a nickname. The White House offered no alternative figures, no competing data sets, no methodological challenges to any of Carney's 7 points. The silence where the counter data should have been was the loudest confirmation of all. American fact-checking organizations independently verified every correction within 24 hours. All 7 were confirmed accurate. The phrase 7 for 7 became the defining metric. 0 of Trump's claims survived scrutiny. Media organizations ran side-by-side comparisons, what Trump said, what is actually true, and the distance between them. Republican trade policy experts speaking on background privately admitted the claims were inaccurate, but said the tariffs serve broader strategic purposes. That quiet admission, yes, the stated reasons are false, but we're doing it anyway, may be the most revealing moment of the entire episode. Trump escalated. He always escalates when he can't answer the question. He threatened additional tariffs, raising the rate to 150%, then suggesting 200%. He threatened diplomatic consequences. He threatened to review the intelligence-sharing relationship with Canada, a breathtaking threat given that the intelligence Carney presented came from American agencies, not Canadian ones. He threatened sanctions against Canadian officials who spread disinformation about American trade policy, which is a remarkable thing to call American data published by American government agencies. Each new threat was bigger and louder than the last. Each one was designed to change the subject from the 7 corrections that nobody in his administration could rebut. Every time a reporter asked about the specific claims Carney had disproven, Trump announced a new threat against Canada. He wasn't answering the question. He was trying to bury it under noise. But the numbers were already out, and numbers, unlike rhetoric, don't get quieter when you shout over them. The information asymmetry is what makes the lies so effective and so dangerous. Trump's original claims reached tens of millions of Americans through his press conference, through friendly media coverage, through social media shares, through rally clips. They were absorbed as fact by people who had no reason to doubt them. Carney's corrections reached a smaller audience. Millions watched them, but not the same millions who heard the original claims. The lie reaches 10 million people. The correction reaches 2 million. And the 8 million who only heard the lie form their opinions, cast their votes, and judge their economic reality based on claims that don't survive a basic fact check. That's the structural advantage of political dishonesty. Claims are always louder, simpler, and faster than corrections. Canada's ripping us off fits on a bumper sticker. The truth does not.